Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Roll Credits. I am here joined by my co-partner Lucas, as always.
What's
And
up?
today, the movie that we are presenting is a 1985 film called Come and See. Lucas, take it away.
Coming See is about the horrors of war, specifically from the perspective of a young Soviet boy in World War II. He is really empowered, he is really encouraged to enlist in the military, and everything that you'd expect in a war movie is not in this. This is not a hero's journey. This is a presentation of all the discomfort, all the annoyance, all the tragedy that comes with war. There's bombing, there's abandonment, there's massacres. I was reading the Wikipedia page. There's psychosis as a result of the bombing. There's PTSD. It's one of the most surprising films I've ever watched because I have never personally, I've never heard of this film until doing this project. Just because I'm not too aware of World War II inspired films as I am with other genres. What were your impressions of this, Marsh?
When I read the description of this movie, I kind of knew what I was in for because when I was younger, I used to watch a shitload of war films. Most notably, Saving Private Ryan. Best TV show as far as a war perspective from American point of view that I watched was Band of Brothers. That's a very highly rated show. I believe it's also on IMDb's list for top 25 shows all time, if I'm correct or not.
That'll be 30 years
Uh,
from now.
yeah, exactly. And a bunch of other war films I've watched over the years. So I was kind of in the right genre of what I was in for, but I never saw it from the perspective of how this played out. And I was really impressed at the way of how they kind of captivated uh, how a literal, 12 to 15-year-old kid is seeing a war happen in front of him and all the casualties and all the faultiness of war, especially with how brutal and just demented Nazis were during that time as a whole. I think
Yeah.
they captivated it perfectly. And also, props to them and the visual effects team for a 1985 film looking this good. I won't lie.
Yeah, there are a lot of special effects, especially towards the end with fires, bodies, carcasses. It is definitely impressive. I feel like the biggest strength that this film has is not only the art department, but also the acting in it. I was not a fan of the acting early on. I felt like everything was sort of stiff. I felt like the characters were just.
Yeah,
I'm not used
I
to, I
can see
guess,
that.
I wasn't used to really like the Soviet culture. So this isn't a
Yeah.
culture like the way that the main character, the way that Fliora interacts with his mother, it just didn't feel there was something off about it, and that's sort of like the main issue I had with this film for the first hour. It was very strange, it was uncomfortable. The romance subplot between him and Glasha was, I hated it. I absolutely
Yeah,
despised
it
it.
was forced as hell.
It was so bad. It was like, this doesn't feel like I'm watching a human interaction. It feels like I'm watching two robots. I feel like I'm watching AI trying to replicate what humans have. But it kind of comes around, and we'll get to that later, but a lot of the issues I have, it gets paid off as the film moves on. One thing I don't know if you noticed this, the sound design, oh my gosh, it was so annoying. And I
Yeah,
don't even
it
mean that like it was poorly made. I mean, it was intentionally made to be disturbing. It was intentionally made to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, these are the casualties of war, dude. Trust me. I have watched way too many war movies and I've played too many games to try to emulate this feeling to where, like, I knew what I was in for with it when watching this. It just felt like it felt classic to me at that point.
How does it compare to other war media that you've absorbed?
I think that this compares pretty damn well, especially with some video games, because some video games tend to toe the line
Yeah.
with how brutal some scenes are. And this did it perfectly, especially with the way that the main character, after he ran through his town and he was running towards the island that Glasha, I think her name was screaming about to the one dude.
Yes. Covered in
Like
mud.
the way that he was acting with his like sense of PTSD slash shell shock, it was played out perfectly to me.
That's really good. I didn't know how I felt about that initially. I feel like it took me a while to sort of accept that scene because I was really hoping for Soviet versus Nazi action, which is what we got inevitably. But
Yeah, we did
early,
get that.
yeah, but early on, a core of this movie was just kind of him dicking around in the woods for like an hour, and that's that. It was never boring, but it was just strange. It's just there wasn't really a
Yeah,
story.
it was odd. It was just
It's
kind of like, oh yeah, he's here right now. We'll get to the good stuff later.
it's super realistic too because it has shown us literally what it's like to be in war without us having to actually experience it.
Yeah, yeah, it cultivates it perfectly if I'm using that word correctly.
Yeah. Um the losing his family, which was predictable. I knew that was going to happen. I feel like there was a lot of predictability in this movie. But
Sorry to cut you off
no,
here.
you're good.
Here's a question I never understood though. Do you remember in the very beginning of the movie when
I know you're going to say.
she s- when she said that that his father was going to be home soon?
Oh. I thought you were going to ask. Oh, okay.
I don't think we ever see his father like unalive or like alive. I really don't think we ever see his dad.
No, yeah, he was definitely killed by the Nazis. I think that's sort of the
Which
point.
like was kind of weird to me because like I mean I know he was mourning the loss of everyone in the town that he grew up in, but like the connection that he had with his mother and his two sisters, like that kind of mourning that we saw like through the characterization of him, like I didn't get that for him out of his dad. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. They didn't really establish that. Or the uncle. Like the uncle comes back and he helps his uncle guides him through like a journey from escaping the village to finding food for the survivors of the massacre,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
he
He
gets
doesn't really
shot.
mourn him that much either. I completely agree with that.
I think he mourns him though. We have a scene of him crying. It's just time passes, so like we kind of skip
Yeah,
him
yeah,
when he's laying against the
yeah,
cow.
yeah. We didn't really notice it all too well. I
Ooh,
won't lie.
ooh, wait a minute, wait a minute. Was that dude? Remember, he and his uncle get the cow. Was that dude his father? Because they kept he threatened this guy with a gun, and he kept calling him father. Do you remember that?
What? Ooh, no, I don't remember that, but that so could have been. That
I don't
so
know if
could have
it's
been.
literal or what, but I swear that Fleora called him father. This is a film that's like you have to rewatch
That's
it to
something.
like get something like that, but I don't want to rewatch
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. And fucking sometimes on the website I was watching it on, the subtitles weren't popping up when certain characters were talking, so a
Mm.
few audio lines I did miss.
It might be purposeful. There might be some dialogue they chose not to have because I was experiencing the same thing.
Yeah,
Um,
that could be a very good case.
the other thing too that I was kind of like irritated by, not because it's bad, but because it's just there are so many things about the first half of this movie that I look at and I would never want to put in my own film because it just is everything against my own artistic instincts. Having this take
Hmm.
place in the woods, this thing could have been shot in central Pennsylvania. I'm not even exaggerating. Like the amount of times they're just in
Oh yeah,
fields,
no, absolutely. It could have
trails.
been. It so could have been.
Yeah. And they also kept reusing that same shot of the plane. Did you notice that? Like it was literally like the
Yeah,
same plane
yeah, yeah.
every
No, no,
time.
no. I don't know if you noticed this. The one time they like they flipped it
Yeah.
around
Yeah, they did.
yeah.
Oh, I called them out on that. And initially I was really ready. I was getting ready to give this a pretty poor rating. I was gonna say this is a very strange um like annoying film, an annoying presentation. My whole thing was visual language is very important. It's better to show, not tell, and this film does that all the time. But I feel like Fleora as a character, he and his family, like you were saying, are so underdeveloped. I wish this was a book. That's what initially I was gonna say. We'll get into like how my opinions have sort of evolved, but do you feel like this could have benefited from like being told in a different medium? Do you think this would have been better as a book if we like knew what was going on in his head?
Well, I mean, this was a novel before it became a movie, wasn't it?
Ooh, yeah, that's right. It was. That's right. It was. I tend to not do research into my movies before I review
Yeah,
them, so I'm glad
and
to
you
know
want
it
to know
was a
something that's
novel.
crazy too?
What
That
up?
you literally talked about this 5 minutes before we started, so that's kind of funny.
Yeah,
But besides the point,
that's true.
another to be honest with you, the funniest thing. Now, granted, I know this is a very serious film, so there shouldn't be much to any humor in it.
There's some
But
comedy. Life is inherently funny.
the funniest thing that I fucking found from this film was like the first like 20 minutes when the two soldiers come into Fleora's house and it's the dude with the helmet on. He's just sitting there fucking slamming the buttermilk, and he's starting to make faces at the two little fucking sisters. Oh, I don't know. To me, that was just funny as hell.
That
I
was
was losing
sweet.
my mind at it.
It was a wholesome moment because it reminds us that these soldiers, these people who are just killing each other, they have humanity. There's a human side to it, and obviously it was gonna make us upset because, well, when they showed that, it was pretty apparent that the kids were gonna get killed eventually because they probably would not
Yeah.
have shown that otherwise.
And the
Um,
other thing I didn't really understand from it too, like the first, like when we just saw those two soldiers before I saw the entire platoon, was that I didn't realize that they were Soviets.
oh, okay,
Didn't did not realize that. Well, because of the fact that the way that they were dressed, they didn't look like traditional Soviet soldiers during that time. They
yeah.
kind of did look more like Germans, and both of the weapons that they had were German issued weapons during that time. So that kind of threw a loop at me for the first 10 minutes. But then once I saw uh the Soviet type tank, the Soviet Union flag, and literally I think 12 different dudes in the picture holding PPSH-71s, one of the most iconic Soviet weapons during that time, I knew that it was Soviets.
Oh, that's so cool. I wish I had like that sort of background and knowledge on war. I'm glad you were able to provide that. Because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I wonder if this is accurate in terms of which
Yeah,
uniforms are
because
what.
literally the first dude that walked in, like the dude who was chugging the buttermilk, got an MP40. It's like the most iconic German weapon there is.
Wow. Um,
Yeah, I know too much about guns. Anyway, next point.
Next point. Well, eventually they show up. About an hour 20 into the film, the last 40 minutes of it, the Nazis show up to this town that Fliora and the young Soviet boy Fliora, who enlisted with the Soviets. Well, he's actually Belarusian, but that's besides the point. The young Belarusian boy who joins the Soviet resistance forces. They're all sort of corralled up, just like the Jews, just like the Poles, just like the Catholics, just like the Soviets, just like everyone that the Nazis came across who weren't, the pure Aryan German race. Shove them in a barn, and they light the barn on fire. They shoot through the barn, and the acting is incredible. The screams are horrifying. It is genuinely the most terrifying thing I've ever watched in film. I've watched a lot of horror movies, and because this is real, this is a real event that people have experienced. I don't think I've felt more emotionally affected by a piece of media than this one.
Yeah, yeah. As far as like as what we've seen on the podcast so far, definitely. I mean, for me, like I've kind of watched a lot of gory things to like where this didn't phase me as much, but definitely to someone who's like new to this media, I could definitely see how this kind of like pulled on the heartstrings a lot with the straight complete horror. Now, granted, if I was in this situation, I'd be doing the same thing. No word of a lie, but to me this just didn't like phase me as much just because I've watched this same thing happen in so many different medias.
Do you think it's effective in terms of presenting? Because I feel like a lot of what makes this effective is the fact that we don't see gore. It's the fact that we just hear the screams and the way they
Yeah,
frame this.
no, I think that plays into it perfectly.
The way they frame this too, that I really appreciated was it was more of an objective lens. It was nothing but, I kid you not, it was 10 minutes of this where it was just the Nazis coming in blasting their German music, which I loved, by the way. That was a horrifying detail. These Nazis just
Yeah,
blasting their
yeah, no,
music
it played into it perfectly.
to
It was
like
wonderful
tune out the screams.
from an artistic point. From an
Yeah.
artistic point, not that I
Yeah.
love the Nazis.
No, yeah. But it was just the acting was fantastic. Just the pure evilness of them was perfectly conveyed through the acting, and the action. And they all run off into the sunset like a bunch of cowboys. To them, it's a victory. To these people and to everyone else, it's a massacre. The fact that
Yeah,
I feel like
horror.
watching this, I don't know how anyone could be a supporter of any sort of genocide or racial discrimination or bigotry just based off of experiencing just living in someone else's shoes, someone else's perspective. The grandma who they spared, who they brought out on a bed, who smiles because she's alive. These are
Yeah,
people who we have nothing in common with, but we empathize with them because that's what makes us human.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much we could go on about this film. There's so much like little just like scenes and moments we could just dive into. I don't know. This movie just it knocked it out of the park for this being a movie where I had to read every word that was being said because it's in another language.
Yeah. What does it mean to you to just watch something like this? Because you've seen a lot of war movies. You've seen a lot of like movies that display, this sort of graphic content. And I've seen my share of gore. I've watched plenty of Ari Aster to know. I've watched, John Carpenter. And to me, what does it mean to have real life tragedy displayed so vividly through art? I feel like it's important, but I'm just curious. Like, I know it's important to make art like this, but what does it mean to watch art like this?
What does it mean to watch? What it means to watch media like this is to represent what people went through, so hopefully we don't recreate the mistakes of the past. Is to solidify the point that this happened to millions and millions and millions of people. I don't even know how many people actually died during World War II, and it's probably in the hundreds of millions if I would to take a ballpark answer.
Yeah.
And it's just simply there so that we hopefully never repeat this again, and it's there to solidify the fact that Adolf Hitler was a god awful human being, and anyone to do anything like that again should be assassinated on the spot.
That is absolutely something that I feel like I definitely agree with that sentiment because when I was watching this, the ending has this it's incredible. It's one of the most beautiful endings I think I've ever seen in film. Um, it made me remember we are not this is not it's easy, it's fun, it's easy to rally against Hitler, but there are so many other people, so many other dictators, so many other just like powerful people in this world who have committed similar atrocities who don't get the same sort of defamation,
Yeah,
like
and
truthful
banishment that
defamation.
he got.
Yes, and I feel like it's important for there to be other media that describes this sort of thing, especially today, just because you got to keep informed. You got to stay informed. Um, I think that I hope that this could be a sign, or at least there can be a sign from other artists to speak out against people who oppress their rights, their livelihoods, their existence.
War is a terrible thing, and war never changes.
Yeah. The thing that I loved.
Here's actually something I looked up. Sorry to cut you off
No, you're
again.
good.
Something I just looked up. That screaming scene where
Yes.
they're all in the barn, that is pulled from real audio footage, by the way.
Oh, that's real. Are we?
Yeah,
Oh, that
that's real screams.
okay. Yeah. So this is this is something I wanted to make a next point. This movie brilliantly infuses real life imagery with the event that happened. There are flashes of Holocaust, probably not survivors, people who are dying, like basically corpses, real footage, and that to me was the moment that made me realize thank God this is a film. Thank God this is not a book because you can read the book and say, okay, so what? But actually seeing
Yeah,
these
this
images,
helps visualize it.
forcing us to watch, and I was actually like thankful that like the Germans were blasting their music, that the smoke and the gunfire was so loud because I didn't want to hear the screams. I didn't want to experience the horror. But it's important to like you will never empathize with these people unless you see what they've been through, and
Exactly.
that goes for anyone. And that's just what did you think about that? That's what did you think about the Hitler montage?
What did I think about the Hitler montage? I thought it was like it was a very good momentum point, especially at the end of the film, like how he was kind of sitting there blasting the picture of Hitler we've seen. Because funnily enough, Lucas, we have seen that same framed photo since the beginning of this film. I don't know if you picked up
Really?
on it, but I did.
Oh, it's so
And it
good.
when he's first going when he's first like leaving the town and he's like passing by everybody, you can see someone literally walking with it.
That's right.
So it's crazy to see that same framed photo travel from where he started at to where the movie ends in a whole different town.
Oh my gosh. And that also in
And
a way symbolizes the Nazi, occupation, because they're headed towards
yeah,
Germany
the
and how they
Nazi
were.
regime.
Yeah, exactly.
Their literal next trip before they made that, like, because I also don't quote me on this. No, it's not. I was thinking it was the Battle of Stalingrad, because that is a very important battle in World War II history for the Russians to finally make the push back into their country. That was not that battle at the end of the film. They just kind of got caught off guard, and then the ones that were left fucking got burned to a fucking corpse. But uh, the Hitler montage, to get back on point, I thought it was very interesting to kind of like see how everything was kind of going backwards more than forwards every time he put another bullet into the painting.
He was
I
undoing
thought that was
fascism.
kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was really cool
it's
to me
beautiful.
because I've never seen a movie do that before. And for directors and writers to make that out of, obviously a country that isn't exactly known for their filmmaking, wild.
Yeah, like that is I will that montage will stay with me for the rest of my life. The flashes, the ethical dilemma of when he approaches Hitler's portrait as an infant and he can't bring himself to shoot baby Hitler the same way that the Soviets couldn't bring themselves to shoot the Nazi survivor because they actually have empathy, even though the Nazis said that they all deserve to die. It is
Yeah,
an unbelievable display of empathy, humanity, and evil.
it is one wild roller coaster of a film, I can tell you that much.
Feels more like the line to a roller coaster on a sweaty day, but we get the point. Yeah, I was just blown away by the ending, and honestly, I have never. There's the only other movie I've ever seen that left my jaw dropped was I saw the TV Glow, because that movie's just that movie's insane, but for very different reasons. This movie, my
Never
jaw
watched
actually
it.
was dropped. It's a really good movie. It's really very unique.
Duly noted. All right. Well, on to our next point here. What do we think about rating this, or can we rate this?
Yeah, like that's what I was thinking. I had to really gather my thoughts for a while because how can you quantify human suffering? How can you put a label on something and say, okay, yeah, this experience, yeah, this is you can't. You can't. But this is art. It was very challenging for me to distinguish the stories, the real life audio,
Yeah,
the real life imagery,
the piece of media compared to like what actually happened during that time.
because it's directly intertwined with it. There's real world just images of people getting killed, dying, put into this movie. And I, as a piece of art, it is it's sort of everywhere. Like, I still don't like the first half of this movie from just a purely um, artistic perspective, because there's a lot of focusing on moving around. I don't know if you noticed that. I get they were trying to build like pacing where we would follow characters running across fields, running through the woods, going through the bog, as you mentioned earlier, because later on there's nothing but chaos and actions constantly happening. But I just did not like the direction that the first half of this movie was in. And I feel like all of its strengths is really elevated at the end. Glasha, the romance subplot, which I hated. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how I honestly don't even know how much time has passed um since like between the events of when she met Fleora, but at the very end she shows up, she's a survivor, she shows up and like meets him, and we just see blood.
Oh, that is such a gruesome scene too. That's such a gruesome scene, seeing her walk in with nothing but the whistle and oh, it's just I can't, I won't even describe it. I
Yeah.
can't.
I honestly thought
It makes my stomach quease a little bit thinking about it.
it took me a second. I didn't know if she was pregnant and if they like forced an abortion on her, if she had like a miscarriage or she was
No,
on her period, but like
no, that's just Lucas. You go at one hole enough, eventually it's gonna look like a crater.
yeah, just like the but like where the blood was positioned specifically like
Yeah,
made that
no,
whole.
it looked brutal.
Yeah,
It was brutal.
that was that totally that justified a decision that I was against. And the same thing with like the noise. the weird acting, the weird noise, like the weird line delivery, all of that was just gone, like in the second half, and it was just totally. It was
Yeah,
uncomfortable
it
purposefully.
was just nothing. It was just nothing but watching horror in front of you.
Yeah,
That's all it was.
human suffering, human tragedy, and
I
it's
do have to say one thing that helped with that love triangle or that love thing that you didn't really like too much in that first half. I feel like one thing that really helped with that was kind of when it got cut off when the
yeah,
bombs started dropping. I feel like that really helped me like wrap back into like, oh yeah, this is a war movie. I need to be watching this from the war perspective.
yeah, not their weird you lying. I want children. Weird dialogue that I
Yeah,
hate.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But personally, let's hear where you rate this film because I'm actually curious on this.
I after a lot of like consideration, I feel
A lot
like
of back and forth.
it's impossible to deny the brilliance of those last 40 minutes. And the only reason those 40 minutes are brilliant is because of all the setup we have earlier in the film. Yes, I wish it could have been shot, directed differently. I wish there was less movement, but in terms of like shots of characters moving around in fields. But at the end of the day, this film set out exactly what it wanted to accomplish, and that's to provoke natural empathy towards people whose existence we will never experience, thank God, or never, hopefully, never will experience. And for that,
Yeah,
I feel like
hopefully.
as a display of authenticity, as a display of horror and suffering, I give this film 4.5 out of 5 stars.
All right, all right. Very interesting. Very interesting.
What do you think?
Personally, where I rate this film, I think this like it's tough for me to say that this is the best war film I've ever watched because this was kind of like a niche film to me simply just because of the aspect of this was told through a perspective I've never watched a war film on.
Yeah.
I've never seen it through the eyes of a child unless if you count The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, but I don't necessarily count that to the
Yeah.
aspect that this is because he's going to serve in war. He's not some like, somewhat pampered kid, finding out about a concentration camp and meeting the short end of a stick. No, not to discredit The Boy in the Striped Pajamas because I believe that movie is also based on a true story.
Yeah,
But
I don't know much about it. It's been years since I've seen it.
yeah, I think the last time we watched it was in Sweezak's class. Shout out
Yeah.
Sweezak.
Shout out Sweezak.
But personally, where I rate this film, yeah, this is going to be my first ever 5.
Impressive. So I guess that means it's the best that we've watched so far.
Yeah, yeah. As far as like our rating, as far as like our overall rating list goes, I believe it is. Yeah.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, for anyone who's watching this, who wants to watch this movie, make sure to watch it at a specific time. Don't. I was eating pork chops while watching like the genocide scene, and I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it at all. So know when you're gonna watch it. Check your like mental, emotional state before you watch it. Don't show your girlfriend it. Don't show your family it. Don't be like, hey guys, I got a movie after Thanksgiving. Just be sensitive to yourself and the people around you. And
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't keep a straight face.
it was brutal, dude. It was bad. I was just sitting there and like it was bad.
Oh my god, that you eat fucking punch. Oh my god, that is too fucking good.
No.
Oh my god.
It is awesome. And next week we'll be talking about Quentin Tarantino's breakout film Reservoir Dogs. I'm super excited to check that out. I've been meaning to watch it.
So now, before we end her off here, this movie will be going first then above Toy Story, correct?
Yes.
All right, sweet. We shall see you all next week. Peace out.
Peace out.